Hello, this is Neil Fox, Chief Technology Officer at Hexaware. Hexaware is a global IT services company, and one of the companies we've been working with is Clarivate. Joining me today is Anyu Gao, who's responsible for delivery management at Clarivate. Thanks for coming, Anyu, and please introduce yourself and the audience to Clarivate who may not be familiar.
Thank you very much, Neil. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me on this podcast. So just a little bit about Clarivate. Clarivate is a global leader in providing trusted insights and analytics to accelerate the pace of innovation. Our vision is to improve the way the world creates, protects, and advances innovation. So for those of you who may be listening to this, if you're more interested, then go to Google and search for Clarivate, and you will find more about the wonderful things that we do.
That's awesome. And Anyu, tell us a little bit about your background and your responsibilities.
So my background is really a technical background. So in my degrees, I've been focusing on computer engineering, electrical engineering, and after I started my working life, I joined the technology groups, and ever since that, I've been working in technology, mainly around delivery, so project management, program management, and the Agile, which is the key word for how delivery should be managed in a lot of software product companies, and that's how we do delivery here at Clarivate.
Awesome. So you and I have been working together for a couple of years now on helping Clarivate globally transform to a more agile approach. So let's talk about that for a while, because I think that the audience will find that very interesting as we sit here today in the midst of the coronavirus lockdown. Hopefully this will be a distant memory someday, but it probably will have a lasting impact on the way that people work and people interact in a remote fashion. And certainly Agile has helped you and I do that at Clarivate for some time. So can you talk a little bit about how Agile has impacted kind of a distributed workforce, and for those people working at home, what they should be thinking about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so in our experience, actually, this gives us more reason to be embracing the principles of Agile, because Agile is all about working collaboratively together, listen to every voice, working as a team to find solutions in a quick, iterative way to benefit your customers and your company, right? So in a world, like you said, in a world where we are physically not together for most of our workforce, embracing those values becomes even more important. So distributed Agile is certainly one mechanism that we are adhering to, so that when the physical distances are putting us apart, then we are using technologies and using tools, and it makes actually an extra effort just to make sure that we're connecting with the team we're working with, connecting to our customers, so that we can deliver and solve the problems for them.
So I think we can talk about those elements for hours, very likely, but let's try to keep it to some reasonable period of time. But I'm really interested in what you see as those key principles that make an agile framework and agile adoption in a distributed environment work so well. You mentioned collaboration regardless of distance, but there are some other key elements there too. What in your opinion are they?
So collaboration is definitely a key, and the other thing is quick iteration, which enables you to explore what is it that you can incrementally build that will satisfy your customers. The concept of learning as you go, as opposed to deciding what you're gonna have that will be solving problems for the customers before you even started anything. I think that principle in itself is probably one of the main reasons why Agile at Clarivate is really kind of guiding how we work and how we deliver for our customers.
So doing things incrementally certainly allow us to look back every 2 weeks or so, typically 2 weeks, and say, how did we do over these last 2 weeks, right? And look for opportunities for driving continuous improvement. And those are, that's certainly fundamentally, no matter what your profession is and what you do, being able to retrospect your work and look for opportunities to change the way that you do work is fundamental to driving success and continuous improvement. But you didn't mention the product owner, right? Having a single person that is responsible for both a vision, requirements, and managing the trade-offs. Can you talk about that a bit? Because I think it's just so important.
Yes, I think product owner is, as you said, very critical in the success adoption and getting the value from Agile. If we look at any standard publications about the role of product owner, they not only help team to understand what is it that we are trying to solve, but they also, within the delivery process, make sure that there is always clarity on what is it the teams are doing, and also taking decisions on prioritization and helping team to make sure that they understand how things will change from within the sprint and from sprint to sprint to allow for the best value to be delivered for the customers. So product owner is absolutely center for any successful Agile implementation.
So at Clarivate and lots of other companies, there's a product management function that does market research and competitive analysis and pricing and all of that. And you have those product management professionals, if you will. Are those the people that play the product owner role, or are they somehow different?
That's I'm sure you've seen some kind of different versions of different variants of how that's applied as well when you were doing coaching for us. I think the way we would like to see things is a product owner is really a role that is played by people with different job titles, right? Certainly, product manager is one of those kind of job titles that could be performing the role of a product owner. But there are other instances where roles like business analysts, solution analysts, etc., can also acting as a product owner as well. I think the principle of product owner or of Agile, of product owner within the Agile framework or the Scrum framework is really that the product owner is mainly interested or spending most of his or her efforts on the delivery side once you know what to build. The other aspects, like you mentioned, our market research, etc., is if you really go with the definition, is really out of scope of the product owner role. That's where the product manager piece come in. So in certain situations where we are able to have the product owner as well as the product manager role played by one person, that's definitely what we go with. In other situations where that's for whatever reason, either not practical or not possible, then we do have other roles which will kind of join the team and play the product owner role.
I've been really, I don't want to say obsessed, but focused lately on the notion of vision, right, of creating a vision for the future. And maybe it's because of this whole coronavirus thing has forced, every company to kind of rethink and re-examine their vision for their company and their people and maybe their family. And, it really has forced a lot of us to do a lot of introspection. So in your experience at Clarivate or maybe in other areas, where does that vision come from? Because when I think of the product owner, they're the person in an organization which is driving a vision for whatever that project or program or product might be. So where does that come from and how does it work?
So the way, I think the way it should work, or the way we would like it to work, is really by understanding what problems customers are facing. And also, especially that, I think the waterfall way of delivery is still quite well known, where you think the waterfall team might think that they actually through a long period of designing, they can figure out exactly what to build. Most of the time they can, but the trouble or the problem is what they build may end up not selling or not fixing the problems that either the customers or the markets are not responding to, or maybe in a very delayed way. So I think for me, that vision really comes in where there is a strong product culture where people spend more time doing product discovery, deciding what is it really is worth building, and really validating that very quickly with the customers or the potential customers before you actually start to put a lot of efforts into building something. And then once you get into the building cycle, you're continuously getting that quick and direct inputs or feedback so that you can iterate quickly to be able to solve the problems, which in itself may be evolving as well because of other things. So coronavirus or COVID-19 certainly is one of those forces that could cause sudden changes as to what kind of things that the customers are experiencing in terms of their challenges.
And so how, in some of your business units, do product management or product owners understand that problem and test that with the end users, right? Because I understand and agree with you that the vision is designed to solve a problem or address a need, and so coming up with a hypothesis of, hey, I think these people have this problem or this need, and I think this is the right solution. How do they actually test that with users?
I think there is quite a lot of literature available in terms of how that's done, right? I think in terms of using prototypes to create something really quickly that you can either show and get the customer to experience it, which is a very common way that is very widely used in the industry. And I think certainly from our perspective, using prototypes is something that we really want to do more actually as well. And other things like interviewing your customers, getting to know what they need, in my view, are still needed. But at the same time, I think understanding the customer behavior, especially in this world of interconnectivity, user usage, or the user behaviors that you can get from your products, that should be one area that I think everybody working in product software development should be looking into in terms of understanding your customers and their problems.
So I would say overall at Clarivate, we're trying to follow a lean startup thinking of that kind of hypothesize, build, measure the impact, and then pivot based upon those measurements. Is that fair?
Yes, and I think for sure that's our outlook of how really one can understand their customers and the customers that we serve. If you go to Clarivate.com, we serve a very wide range of scientific, academic backgrounds, or academic scientific groups of users, your universities, your research institutions, your pharmaceutical companies, your IP, intellectual property management agencies, etc. So these are the people who are, as the name suggests, highly intellectual, and because of that, in order to understand them, I think it's critical that we do the things we said. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Understanding your audience and speaking the same language and having the same paradigm and mindset certainly helps make that vision as effective as possible. So are your product owners from the user community? Are they similar in that regard? Are they scientists?
The answer is yes, for sure. A lot of them have actually used our product when they were performing those roles as scientists, etc. And certainly that is one of the key differentiators that we have. So we're not a group of people who are serving the customers pretending we know the customers. We are actually, a lot of the the business people that we have actually come from those backgrounds, having experienced what the customers are experiencing. So for sure, that's the key thing that's within the Clarivate setup. Yeah.
So would you say that you guys follow design thinking? For those of you listening that may not be familiar with design thinking, the underlying tenet is to empathize with your users as closely as you possibly can. And there are different types of users. So through design thinking, a lot of techniques are applied to create personas of the different users, ideally based from that user perspective, understanding their motivations and their challenges and their affiliations and social constructs as much as you can to get in the head of those users. Would you say that Clarivate follows that philosophy today?
It's I think in terms of the overall, right, we're serving many industries. We are unique in our offering. We're serving many industries simultaneously. It's not easy to kind of generalize and then say that is the practice for everybody in everywhere, right? And there are some intricacies about the differences as well. That's why I think the way that I would like to look at this, certainly from a delivery management perspective, is this enables us to be in a place where you are confident about what you're delivering and you are experimenting and getting quick feedback in your delivery. So anything to do with, from my perspective, iterative delivery, getting feedback and being able to learn and adjust your course is certainly the way that I would say not just Clarivate, but people with product development in a software fashion should be following. And actually, maybe Neil, from your perspective, because you do see these companies, you do see a lot of companies who are maybe having similar problems like us. What with your observation, how do you think is the best way that not Clarivate, but kind of generally speaking, what is the trend or what is really the way that we should all look forward to in terms of being more efficient and effective in the marketplace? What are your thoughts on those things?
Yeah, I think that overall empathy is a must-need characteristic of product owners, right? That product owner, if you look up the strict definition of it, is essentially the voice of the customer, right? And so you can't have the voice of a customer without understanding your customer. I think one of the challenges a lot of companies that I work with have is the product owner either not coming from the user community or not understanding it well enough, or making the mistake that all users are the same. We work with a lot of different companies, as you suggest, and our advice is for that product owner or product management or someone in marketing to build these personas. Whether you follow the classical design thinking methodology or not doesn't really matter, but certainly understanding how people use your product is key to both efficiency and success, especially in a dynamic world that we live in today. So, it's not a one-time exercise, but the overall dynamic nature of people's needs and motivations and challenges, problems, as you said, Anyu, should be a rigorous and robust exercise to both hypothesize and monitor customer interaction and feedback.
Yeah, thank you. And one in the industry that you serve, in the companies that you work with, one kind of customer persona, customer behaviors are well understood. How does that translate into the delivery cycle? What are the teams able to benefit when that's understood? What are the, I would say, maybe the behaviors of the team or the symptoms of how the team perform? Would you say is, if you do that, if you see that, then that means your input into your delivery is good.
Yeah, one of the things that you and I both didn't touch upon enough is the notion of prioritization, right? Because this is where this is the subject matter that we're kind of circling around at the moment, which is the life is all about priorities, right? No matter what you're doing in any walk of life, you have to be able to prioritize those most important things first, right? Eliminate the things that are not value added or distracting, and focus on those elements that add the most value. And the notion that you're bringing up is, how do you know, right? How do you know what's going to add the most value as a product owner or as an agile team? And so there are a number of different techniques out there to help take features, functionality, right, different characteristics of a software application or whatever the product you might be working on is, and put them in a forced list, like ranking them from top to bottom, and assigning different value points based upon the amount of revenue you're going to generate, or costs you're going to cut, or happiness, number of smiles you're going to generate, whatever those value elements are, and then making sure that you're constantly looking at those things, as you said, Anyu, with an agile approach where we're doing these iterations, right, classically called sprints. Every sprint we get a chance to reprioritize based upon new information, and hopefully that new information includes objective customer feedback, whether it be surveys or Google Analytics or some other ideally instrumentation of the usage of our product, so we can make data-driven decisions rather than just gut feel.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that
go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, one of the current affairs is obviously we used the reference a few times now already, is COVID-19, and I think even from a personal standpoint, or kind of a human standpoint, because of COVID-19, which in effect is a big disruptor or disruption to many of our lives, and from my own experience in terms of what becomes more important, to a point about prioritization, even kind of living in your household, in my household, things have taken a different turn, right? So things like delivering, getting food. How do you get your food, right? And that becomes a prioritization discussion, right? How do you follow the government's kind of advice about keeping distance without unnecessary kind of making the necessary trips to go out and buy stuff, prioritization around what are the correct way or the recommended way of getting the groceries that you need, either through delivery or go to your local shop, or maybe queue up 2 meters away from each other in a big supermarket. All of these things become a way to influence on how you prioritize your life, and that became, especially that when we worked and talked, either from a work stance and on a personal level, I think a lot of the principles that we're learning through Agile is all going to find, at least a big chunk of that is going to find practical implementation within the daily life, just because of this outbreak as well. This has been something that's in my mind quite a lot recently. So how to actually practice Agile because of this new change that is, you don't have a choice, but you just have to, and you don't know what the outlook is. It's certainly uncertain, both in terms of extent of the impact, as well as how long it will last, and what will be the kind of the outcome of this when it finishes. And using Agile mindset to manage the situation is something that I feel that maybe I can think more and certainly try to do a little bit more. I don't know whether you, being a long established and respected coach, how do you see kind of Agile principles or Agile way of thinking and being in the midst of COVID-19 outbreak? Do you had any thoughts on that one that you can share with me, or maybe with whoever is gonna listen to this?
Yeah, Anyu, I have had a lot of thinking the way that you have around the companies that I work with personally and their transition to a more agile approach. And I've been thinking a lot about Clarivate, and the fact that we started this about 2 years ago has impacted the culture significantly, so that I believe the company was much better prepared today than they would have been 2 years ago under the same circumstances. Would you agree with that?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, right, the way that we one school of thought is you need to be co-located to be effective in Agile team, right? And then we know that the reasons for that is when you're co-located, your communication becomes easier, your collaboration becomes easier. You can read into people's body language. It's just there in the present. So these things that make Agile team working more effectively. But through the learning of Agile, people have understood, I think, the value of communicating kind of effectively, collaborating effectively, and those are really transferable skills in my view in any setting, albeit physical or maybe virtual.
And I do want to come back to the notion of culture, right? Because I do feel like we've been successful in moving the culture at Clarivate from a more waterfall mindset of design, build, test, deploy to a much more kind of iterative approach based around small releases and prioritization and as you said at the very beginning of the conversation about retrospective and continuous improvement. And so, how do you feel like I kind of just talked about how I feel like we've impacted the culture there, but how do you feel like we have, and what would you recommend as actions for folks that are listening that haven't yet undertaken the journey that you and I have?
I think one thing that definitely came to mind is culture change is not a kind of a downward communication, right? There certainly is not one communication to say let's all do it and then it will be the way that everybody exhibits. We know that in order to change people's behavior, not just in a work setting, I think in a house setting, if you have children, if you want, even yourself, right? If you want to change the way that certain way that you're doing something, it takes a lot of iteration. It takes a lot of explaining why, and then you will impact the behavior, right? So I think for sure that's going to be very very critical in how you actually get the change done. So what I would say is think about, if you have not done Agile transformation before, think about how you would change behavior or how the last time you successfully changed the behavior, what are the key ingredients that allowed you to make that happen, right? So I think there is a lot of explaining the why, and there is a lot of showing rather than telling. There's a lot of trying to, in the spirit of Agile, trying to have quicker iterations to demonstrate value so that people will see it quicker, right? Everybody's very busy. There's a lot going on. But I think from my perspective, these things are super important. And you also need to have people almost like a support group that you can trust. You know that you can be maybe a little bit vulnerable in those settings, so that you can have an open conversation about the most maybe challenging topics. I think with these things in place, the chances of you succeed in changing people's behavior, as well as kind of creating that culture, empowering people to open up and act in that way, is going to be a lot easier.
Yeah, I think you're making a really important point here. I think the COVID-19 situation has forced people at every level and organizations to very quickly prioritize, right? And the motivation is very clear, right? It is truly life and death for a family. It is economic life and the living and paychecks of employees for every organization. The very lifeblood of both people and communities and organizations like companies are driving a very fast set of work that you just described, right? Which is we need to prioritize safety first, and then what is it that we need to do second to make sure that we're economically sound and that we're able to function effectively once this is all over, and then to take a constant retrospective of how are we doing, right? Is there something we need to change there? Are we being safe? Do we need to reduce the number of grocery trips that we're making, or any other behavior that may be required, right? Just recently in America here, and I know that you're based in the UK, but in America they've just said they suggest using facial masks, right? This is not something that they had suggested even just a few days ago. So it is a constant set of continuous improvement, and to be dynamic. And so I do want to take on that theme a little bit and talk about Agile again when it comes to not just personal safety and running an organization, but how do we include the rest of the functions in an organization, right? You and I both work in the tech field. We've been working with people, in and around software delivery. But what about scaling that to finance or HR or sales, other business functions, and how would it apply there, do you think?
I think in my experience, and I would say that I'm going through, just like the spirit of Agile, continuous learning, continuous adjustment, right? In my experience, and this applies not necessarily to other functions. This applies to people who generally do not have understanding of Agile, and who are new to Agile, for example, who has been a kind of a spectacle to Agile. It applies the same. I think it goes back to the Agile principles, right? So the Agile Manifesto, it talks about we value on the left-hand side, what are the things that you value, right? On the right-hand side, what are the things that you think there is value, but you value the left-hand side more, right? So that if we talk to people, not necessarily in terms of we're going to make a change here, you're going to be changed because of this, but really getting to the principles of why, right? Why is it that we think human interaction is better than documentation, right? And so I think these are the basic principles of Agile, and if we have them in our minds when we talk to anybody who, as I said, may for whatever reason are new or spectacle, then in my experience, most of the time, vast majority of the times, then you will have, if not maybe converted somebody, you will be able to have an open conversation, and the other side will be more open into kind of having a conversation with you about this topic, right? So I think for me, it's always about going back to the principles, and then talk kind of. I think the other thing is, like you said, empathy, right? Because when you go to the principles, people are, in my experience, more likely to connect to you, and then after that, after you build that, then maybe we can throw in the other kind of jargons or the terminologies that you would use about what is it that's in Agile, right? So almost in a way, you want to talk about Agile without using maybe the term, because I think the term has got a lot of intonation that certain people have already had a fixed opinion to what that is, but the word itself has been kind of gaining that meaning, but really the principles behind it is, I think, is universal.
No, I think you just defined what a culture means, right? It's a shared set of values, and those values outlined in the manifesto, the Agile Manifesto, not the Communist Manifesto, but the Agile Manifesto, are very useful for driving the entire culture of an organization, right? I mean, certainly different functions and departments and managers create their own kind of microcultures, but hopefully there's one common culture in an organization driving common behavior and common interactions. And the Agile Manifesto, as you said, of collaboration over documentation and adapting to change versus following a plan, are all good principles and a great culture to build. I know at Hexaware we are really committed to those kinds of values, and it really does drive the culture of our organization of 20,000 people across umpteen different locations. And so regardless of what you do and where you are and what function you perform, we all follow a common set of values around those agile principles, which are really, really useful.
Yeah, I think just what you mentioned there, Neil, that one thing that I would also want to highlight is in the manifesto it says about following a plan, right? So responding to change versus following a plan. I think there is a general misconception that in Agile, because of that, you don't need to have a plan. But if you think about the wording in the manifesto, it says you are following a plan, and the prerequisite of that is you need to have a plan. But the point is, your plan needs to be responding to changes as opposed to just keep following it, right? So there's a lot of misconception that is the big one, that people will say, because of Agile, we don't need a plan. But actually, because of Agile, you need an even better plan, because your plan needs to be flexible enough to respond to change. I think that is definitely something that, if anybody, as I said, if anybody is listening, I would say that try to have your conversation in that way. If you end up with no plans, then no matter how you do your sprint planning and your retrospective, then you probably won't be able to achieve what you wanted to achieve.
This is such a great point, because I can't tell you how many organizations I go into with exactly that attitude of, hey, we're Agile, we don't need to have a plan. And like, wait. Right? We do more planning in Agile than we do anywhere else. We just do it constantly, right? And we do it in small pieces, right? So we plan for 2 weeks, or we plan for 4 weeks. We don't plan for 6 months or a year, because we've learned over time that those 6-month plans, those yearly plans just change so much that a huge amount of energy and effort is wasted in managing that plan, rather than managing a smaller plan that's adaptive to change. And so I agree with you, right? And so it is an important point for everyone to take away that planning is a constant activity and not a one-off activity.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Anyu, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that anyone listening has gotten some value out of this. I think you've provided some great advice and insight into the value of prioritization and ownership and iteration and continuous improvement, and the impact that COVID has had, and lots of great stuff here. So I want to thank you so much for joining. I look forward to continuing our relationship for many years to come, and working together to make everyone's lives a little bit better.
Thank you very much, Neil. It's great talking to you as always, and thank you for having me in this podcast.
Indeed. Take care, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Stay safe. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.